All right, it
Hey,
says it's
everybody.
recording.
All right. Yeah, you said you did the clap to figure out where to go, right?
Yeah,
Um, all right. Hey, everybody. This is Tim Mittner with 2.0 Software. I'm here with probably some, if not the most experts in OS deployment in the IT industry today. Um, why don't you all introduce yourself real quick? Well, Johan?
absolutely. My name is Johan Hauritmark. I'm having an engineering role here with 2 Software. As Tim mentioned, I've been doing OSD for a good while, coming up 30 years. So happy to be here.
Hey, I'm Keith Garner. I'm also working on OSD, spent 20 years at Microsoft, and here at 2 working on some exciting stuff.
I'm Mike Niehaus. I'm the new guy at 2 but been around doing this for quite a while as well.
I'm Mike Terrell, and I've been in this space for a while, is also doing OS deployment, Windows management.
I love y'all's humbleness when it comes to your descriptions of yourself. It's great. But today we want to talk about OS deployment from the cloud, which is a fairly hot topic. We hear about it quite a bit with practically any conversation that we have with a customer right now. They're trying to figure out how to image or re-image systems for at-home users or remote users. Now, why do y'all think this has become such a popular topic?
Work from home.
Yeah.
Me. Yeah, it used to be that you could, when you went to the office, they'll go by the IT desk and they'll hand you a computer, and there you go. But now we have to worry about people working from home and working from just about anywhere, which is good. It's good to see the industry kind of moving with some trends. We'll see if that pertains. But yeah, at least that's it for me.
Yeah.
I
Tied
mean,
into that as
I
well, we're finally at a point where you can kind of get away from on-prem infrastructure. The cloud bandwidth is sufficient. People have fast enough connections into their houses. Active Directory and things like that are kind of falling out of favor and moving toward Entra ID join and things like that. So it's becoming practical.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I came from a security background. I was with a security company for almost 15 years. A part of that role, we often have to rebuild the infrastructure for customers that has been victims of ransomware attacks and similar attacks. And basically, whatever they had before to deploy devices in-house, it was gone. They needed a secure, trusted source to deploy things from, and that's where cloud imaging come in quite handy, because you can very quickly either have done it in advance or set up a new solution quickly to get that imaging going. And then, of course, a few years later, back in 2020, the dang COVID certainly did not help. Everybody was sent home, and we started to see new scenarios where we had to image devices where we maybe not had to do that before.
Yeah, and you could basically combine those two stories of you've got malware outbreaks and people working from home. So you're now more susceptible. Say if you're working alongside your kid who's also working on their laptop and their laptop gets infected, then you could get infected as well. And so now you have to deal with that scenario as well, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
we have construction companies coming out to a new plant. They're supposed to be building a hospital for 6 months. The first machines that come aside, they will only have internet access, but they still need to get something on them so they can get to work. That's also a scenario where you can
Yeah.
do cloud imaging.
Yeah, I think another scenario too is moving from the Active Directory or hybrid to native Azure, right? Microsoft doesn't support any kind of movement there, so that's going to require basically a reload of Windows.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good point. If you want to be sure that that device is clean to accept Intune policies, for example, reimaging is the way.
Yeah.
This is the way.
Sadly,
So what are the options? No,
it can be
go ahead.
faster to re-image a device over the internet than it is to reset the OS, just
Yeah.
to get a clean OS on the box that way.
Yeah.
A 2-hour reset versus an hour-long download, I'll take the download.
Is that
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
of you're resetting the box, but you're also then you have to apply all the updates again, which are just as big? And
Not really. It's just a super slow process.
Mhm.
Windows resetting itself reapplies every single OS component one by one through the servicing stack, which generates a tremendous amount of I/O. Even on the fastest SSDs, it takes way too long.
Wow. So, what are some of the options for doing remote imaging or imaging from the cloud?
I think everyone started off with trying it with Config Manager, using the Cloud Management Gateway. And as Config Manager added support for doing that, you just needed boot media to initiate the process, and then everything else could be pulled from the cloud. It's not to
Yeah, I
say
mean,
that there weren't plenty of issues doing that, but it was at least something that could be done.
yeah, I mean, to your point, that's currently still today the only solution that Microsoft develops and fully supports. It's that integration between the cloud management gateway and config manager, allowing you to image devices anywhere. But the community certainly has not been lying still on this topic, and neither have we. As a company, we've been supporting the community heavily in this area. So you have the extension to MDT, the Powershell deployment that we have been a part of helping development. In fact, it was actually Michael Nias here that initiated that process back in 2016, 2017, something like that. And we have continued to develop that since. We have other community friends. We have David Segura, who's been maintaining a solution called OSD Cloud, and that solution recently got some help from Gary Block, another good friend in the community. So those are pretty much the three one that I know of that are out. There might be others, but those are the ones I've seen.
there's also one variation. If you have a new machine that comes from an OEM, there's autopilot, so which
Yeah.
is kind of a variation of that. It's not it certainly won't help with re-imaging, and certainly won't help with if you have corruption. But if you have a new machine,
Yeah, a common question I get a lot on that is if I have autopilot, do I still need imaging capabilities? So, like, how would you respond to that?
Do you have to have it? No. Do most customers that are using autopilot have it? Yes. For more scenarios than you would think. I mean, obviously you need it for break fix because you need to be able to get a OS back on a box that's lost its hard drive or otherwise got corrupted. But it's still surprising the number of customers that will start off an autopilot process by re-imaging the box because they don't trust what the OEMs put on the machine as it ships from the factory. So it's kind of a hybrid. They start off with OSD, but finish up with AAD, autopilot, Intune, and I wouldn't say best of both worlds. It's almost worst of both worlds, but it at least means that you can get a clean OS with drivers onto the box, leveraging the old-fashioned techniques that you've used, but then let autopilot take it from there and get it into Azure AD and Intune and potentially co-managed and back into the config manager control as well.
Yeah.
I will
It sounds
mention
like,
that there is a concept of installing the machine from scratch and management ongoing.
yeah.
That in all scenarios, I do recommend you should have a management solution for maintaining the machine going forward, keeping patched up to date, adding applications, updating applications. If you have that management solution running that's installed correctly, you have people in the right groups with the applications associated with that, with those people in those groups. Yeah, it should be setting up a new machine should be cakewalk because we're only doing a very little amount at the very start to get it provisioned, get it integrated into your management solution, get Active Directory joined, and then your management solution can do the rest of installing the applications, keeping up to date, patch drivers. So I do think, coming from the MDT background, where MDT is not a management solution. It's just there to install a couple of applications to get you started. So some people think that's enough. It's not. So do be aware of that.
Yeah. Well, just to bring up something that Johan mentioned earlier is kind of disaster recovery scenarios. So ransomware attacks. Last time I read, they're getting worse, not better. So as part of your business continuity, it's good to have OS deployment strategy in place so that you can quickly recover if you do get hit by a ransomware attack. That's something that you're not going to recover from quickly if you don't have anything in place for it.
Yeah, I mean, the last numbers I heard on that topic was basically going 10 times the amount of ransomware attacks in just last year compared to a few years earlier, back in 2019. And that's a significant increase. It's nice to have a plan B if something happens.
Do we all think that ransomware recovery is kind of the same problem as kind of this deployment from the cloud, or is it a superset or a subset?
I mean, it's the same solution. You need
It's a
to
good
image
tool.
boxes.
Like in a lot of cases, even customers that I've seen that had full disaster recovery processes would start executing it and realize that this is going to take too long. That how do we get our devices back up and running now? I don't want to wait until 3 days from now to be able to reimage my machine and get signed back in and start getting into my email. I just want to work again. So even Microsoft, when they would go in and try to help customers recover from ransomware, would just say, we're going to start off with just blasting a new OS down to the device using whatever mechanism, whether it's USB key or cloud or whatever. We're going to join it to Azure AD. We're going to get it lightly managed through Intune, and we're going to go from there. Is that the permanent end solution? Maybe not, but it at least gets you functioning again.
Yeah, and if you have ransomware in a box, I know I wouldn't necessarily trust doing a device reset on a box that has got ransomware on it, because I'm under the assumption if a device is infected, nothing is safe on that endpoint at all. It needs to be blown away, installed from scratch. So. So one of
I
the
will mention that in addition, that it's kind of something we're looking at right now, ransomware recovery, mainly because we kind of have two technologies right now that kind of play into that. One, we have iPixie. So when you're in the cloud, how do you initiate this kind of download process? So one of our technologies, iPixie, it was designed to work over HTTP, HTTPS. So that is an internet protocol, not this TFTP junk or slowness that takes forever to download. So that's one of the things we're working on. Additionally, another technology we have was the kind of branch cache. So how do you download these images? How do you get these up and running at scale quickly? Because that's the other big problem with working from home, working from kind of remote branch offices. So we're kind of looking at kind of some technologies of combining those two to help jumpstart the ransomware recovery process. So you find out a branch or a site or your entire company is infected with malware. Let's quickly use this iPixie to boot up into an environment. iPixie also has the ability to boot up not just WinPE, but also full operating system. So maybe we can get something up and running that works, that people can browse the web, check their email, that sort of thing. And in the background, we are streaming down, using the branch caching from sites, which we do already, and then also maybe uploading your machine that's infected for analysis later on, or trying to extract out necessary files later on. So we're certainly exploring that. I mean, the technology is there right now. It's just what are the workflows and what do our customers need to be able to get that to work?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Keith. Is like you need to boot the box some way, some shape, whether it be USB or network or ISO in a virtual machine. But that is actually one of my menu items on my lab's iPixie server is OSD Cloud. I just created an option in there, so if I want to quickly test something using OSD Cloud, I can just boot right to it. I don't even need to find the actual USB key. So iPixie is very flexible in terms of booting to a variety of different sources, and they could be local, they could be in the cloud, wherever.
It's
Yeah,
funny
for
that you
those
mentioned
who,
it. Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, for um, you all have brought up iPixie a couple times, but do you just want to give like a quick overview of what iPixie is and what problems it might help solve?
Sure.
I can.
iPixie is certainly it's network booting. So not just booting off a USB stick, not booting off a hard drive, but booting over the network. And most modern business laptops support booting up over the network. But in addition to that, iPixie is an old technology. It's been around for 30 or 20, 30 years. And it uses some kind of slower tech, TFTP, some other technology that's doesn't really scale very well. So a group, a public organization, iPixie.org, has created a new protocol that sits on top of existing Pixie that could download over more modern protocols like HTTP over the internet. So even within a corporate environment, it's going to run much faster, and even within, and especially over the internet, it's going to run much, much, much faster. I don't know, Johan, do you have any other color?
No, I just I may or may not have prepared a demo
Yeah,
showcasing that.
yeah. Go ahead.
So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'm gonna put you guys up on the right side here. Here we are. So to give you a bit of a background, I have a bunch of web servers running in this environment that are hosting the development or deployment solution. And that web server can be in your data center, can be with an ISP's data center, could be in Azure, could be in Amazon, could be anywhere to which you have port 443 open so you can access the web server remotely over the internet. Or the local network for that matter. We have customers who are actually using this as their main imaging solution in-house also, but that was your pure accident that they decided to go that route because they learned that it works so well to deploy over the internet, so they decided, well, we can use that internally too. Anyhow, so that's on the server side. Then if I go to one of my virtual machines, go to a clean snapshot of that one, and I'm going to do a pixie boot. And as soon as I see the menu, I'm going to pause it so we can see where it's connecting to, because it goes pretty quick when that happens. So here, dang it, I said it goes quick. Let me go to a slightly slower network. That was too fast. Liverpool is a little bit slower, has a bit of a latency to it. See if I can snatch the screen just when it starts. Here we are. It's connecting to an HTTPS web server something, and it's asking me to present it to PixieBoot. Now, because I froze the screen, I missed the press enter thing, so I will have to do it one more time, but I wanted to show that to you how it looked. So we're going to restart this again, and this time I will press enter. Wait patiently. And here we are. So in my case, I just decided, like Mike mentioned, I have a few different boot menus I can boot from. These are different boot images. That can be a config boot image, it could be a PSD boot image, it could be an OSD Cloud boot image, it could be a utility boot image with Dart recovery tools on them or something like that. But I'm going to pick one of these boot images, and it's going to download. And this is also an HTTPS download, meaning it's, as Keith mentioned, there is no TFTP, UDP, that kind of stuff. It's a fairly quick download. Even if there are no local friends available, this is a quick download. Now, had I had any machines on my network that I deployed earlier, I would have been able to snatch the boot image from then. rather than downloading from the web server. But right now, this is WinPE connecting up to a web server. And shortly, when it decides to start, using BT info here in the background to do some updates on the screen, and eventually we will see it's trying to connect to that web server. It takes maybe 30-40 seconds to reach to that point, because we are indeed deploying over internet in this case. So give this a moment. Here we are. It's trying to connect. This requires a certificate in the boot image. It requires a username and password that I hard-coded in for demo purposes. Otherwise, it will stop and prompt me. So basically 2 layers of authentication right there. But this deployment wizard, you can toggle off these different panes if you like them all or you like none of them. But I kept them all for demo purposes. I will pick a sequence I want to deploy. This was Windows 11 22H2. I will give it a device name, so I'm clever here. I will give it a password. I regional settings, select an application, and get a summary. And from now on, this is just a regular sequence. But I initiate all of this by doing a Pixie boot over the internet using iPixie, our solution in the backend, to help downloading that image. And during deployment, we will leverage another one of our techniques, and that is we support branch cache in WinPE. We have a product called the OSD Toolkit. It basically enables branch cache during the first phase of imaging. So in that particular sequence that I'm showing you, if I go up to the server side and take a quick look on that one, I have added in the steps that makes this possible. A few additional steps in the sequence that enables branch cache or starts that service, because we have a tool that adds those components to the boot image. But that means that now when I do imaging, as soon as there is someone around that have the content, the machine will be able to peer from that device. If there are nobody around, it will download directly from the web server. But this is particularly interesting for 2 reasons. One is cost, because it costs about $1 to deploy a machine if you pay for the entire download from Amazon or Azure. But if you only download 10 megs from there, and the rest coming from local friends, it's much, much faster. Plus, it's cheaper.
A lot cheaper.
You can deploy hundreds of devices within an hour by peering content to each other. So that's all I wanted to show at the moment.
Just to add
This
some
is it.
color here for anybody who's looking at PowerShell deployment, but Johan has an MDT console in the background. PowerShell deployment is really an add-on for MDT. PowerShell deployment uses kind of MDT, some of the backend components of the workbench and a couple other things to populate all the scripts, and then we have an entirely new set of scripts written in PowerShell that builds on top of it. So there's kind of a combination. So for those people watching this video wondering what PowerShell deployment is, why is Johan using MDT? It's a combination.
Oh yeah, that's a good call. I mean, if you take a normal deployment share in MDT, and good old MDT, I should say, you will find that it has closer to 200 some VB scripts in that folder and some other files. The PowerShell version of it, we converted not all of them, but a lot of them over to PowerShell. So we have 44 PowerShell scripts instead.
Yes.
So we kept the workbench for management. We kept the sequence engine because it still works beautifully. But VB script is not really the scripting language you want to focus on.
More modern PowerShell scripts.
Yeah.
A couple of iPixie differentiators too. There are a few other peer-to-peer Pixie type solutions out there. But the beauty of 2Pixie is there are no agents to deploy. So you don't need to deploy any agents on other machines to actually get this to work. The peering all comes via branch cache, which is native to the operating system. And the iPixie binaries are smart enough to leverage that branch cache technology to grab the boot images from the peers or friends, as Johan likes to say. So that's benefit number one. Number two is maybe your network isn't configured for Pixie booting, which is fine. It can be easily enabled via IP helpers or DHCP scope options is probably better. It's quicker, easier to control. But in the event that you still don't have those in place, you can still initiate iPixie via USB, which basically is two small files on a USB stick, pop it in, boot off of it, and it'll reach out to the iPixie infrastructure. So that's slick. And then also lastly is like ISO. So something that we haven't really discussed much yet here is server OSD. So there's a lot of server builds or remote server builds that are invoked via ILO or lights out type cards. Typically, you can mount an ISO through those across the wide area network, and it takes an extremely long time for that machine to boot up. Whereas you can mount a small little ISO, and it's going to boot up in a fraction of the time because it's booting HTTPS across the network.
Yeah.
Mike, you said something that was really interesting. Like a lot of people, when you say do a USB boot, they're freaked out because they're like, oh, I got to put Windows PE on my USB drive. I might have creds inside of there. I might have certificates inside of there. Like now that USB drive is going to get leaked, people are going to get all my credentials. Like you said something about like two small files. Can you go into that just a little bit in more detail?
Yep. So you have an iPixie file that basically contains the same information that you would put into like your scope options, tells what server to reach out to, and then the actual EFI file, which is tiny. I forget what the size is lately, but it's really really small. So there are credentials on that USB key for 8021X. We did a previous webinar on 8021X, but for those that didn't see it, we can actually control that all via server side so that once you authenticate on the server side, then it can process that 8021X exception request. And so you don't have to have a USB key, like you said, with WinPE that might have your certs baked into it. And yeah, if it gets lost or stolen, that is a security incident right there. You lose an iPixie USB, they're going to see the FQDN to your iPixie server, and then that's about it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Tim, you're right about the size. Typically, when you boot for USB key with WinPE, you're going to put a WinPE image like 500 megabytes image onto a USB stick. With iPixie, it would only be about 1 megabyte compared to 500. So, which is easier to snail mail. Or mail to somebody, hey, please, if you have a USB key, copy this file onto your machine and you can recover your laptop right away for people who are really remote. But yeah, compared to downloading a 500 megabyte file, much easier.
Yeah. So we talked about, oh, go ahead.
We do have a tool that allow you or help you to create that USB stick. I just put it up on the screen here. You can either have it create an ISO or you can have it create a USB stick. And there is a pretty cool option that is, I wouldn't say hidden, but it's down here. You can actually ask it, say that you deployed the device already. You can ask the device to populate the USB stick with all the branch cache blocks that the sequence used, and they will be encrypted on this USB stick. So if you image device number 2 from that same USB stick, every time the sequence tries to download something, it's going to see that, wait a minute, it's right here. And it's going to borrow it from the USB stick rather than from the web server. And this is what Mike was mentioning earlier. We have these different options to either ask for instructions or to specify instructions. We have the script that define where we go to get content. But a piece that I'm pretty dang happy for, and that's a mild statement. We have developed a new version of our web service that allows for automation of the server side. And Mike mentioned unlocking 802.1 exports as an example, but you also use this for Windows Autopilot. It could be anything from just asking, I am deploying device, is the autopilot information ready for that device? Or could it be that that device has not been staged yet? Well, go ahead and stage it then. Or go ahead and provide a JSON file so we can do autopilot for existing devices. There are so many options available when we have a web service that we can reach either from already in the earliest of WinP phases, but at any time in the deployment process, we can ask this web service to go and do jobs for us. So in my lab, I'm using that to do autopilot registration. I don't want the client on its own doing that, because that means that I'm exposing my app registration or whatever credential I'm using in my script on the client side. It's much better to just hand it up to the server and say, you deal with it. And then the server go ahead and do the thing it's supposed to do, and then tell the client, all right, you're good to go. So that was all I had for now.
Yeah, no, that's great. So looking a bit to the future, so we've talked a little bit about like network booting over Pixie booting over the internet. We've talked about USB drives. Like looking towards the future, what are some other options that are either out there now, it's just not being fully leveraged, or that will be coming?
I will mention again the kind of those ransomware scenarios. We think we understand a couple of ideas about how that can work, but we're certainly looking for customers to come back and kind of show us, or hey, we'd like this scenario. We'd like to be able to, for example, a lot of new PCs have the ability to add HTTP rather than we can, Mike and I have written scripts before to set BIOS settings to add a HTTPS request. So there, we can automatically boot a machine to the network over HTTP, iPXE, download files without touching any content on the disk. In fact, if it's BitLocker, leave it encrypted. We will never unencrypt it. That sort of thing. So we're certainly looking for customers to come back and tell us what would be good to add in. What's their workflows? Do they want to recover these sort of scenarios? Right now, iPXE does all sorts of things with being able to download content, run OSs, and get cache. But what does that look like? I don't know yet. We're going to find out. It's going to be fun.
You mentioned the ability to kind of boot from BIOS or boot from UEFI over the HTTPS, and to me that's super fascinating because there were slightly different implementations across each of the OEM providers, and it seems like they're starting to work not together, but they're starting to implement the same thing just by competition. And so the great thing for that is almost all of the OEMs now have got a method of booting to an EFI file, which could sit out on a web server someplace in which we could boot. And that's amazing. And what's really neat about that is, I know specifically on the Dell systems, I've been able to remote image boot from a Starbucks from a UEFI by connecting to Wi-Fi. And so it's pretty nice. And I think more of that will be coming.
Yeah, I'm a little bit biased, but HP sent me this little shiny thing.
Yeah.
It's an HP Firefly, and this particular one has the option where you as an admin can configure pretty much any payload you want on it. There is an extra flash drive where you can put stuff in that can either be a boot image or an OS image or both, or simple instructions which web server to go and grab that boot image from and download and initiate the process. So on this device, instead of pressing F12 to do a network boot, I press F11 to enter the HP factory mode. But instead of going to HP's default, whatever they call their stuff in the back, and Sure Recovery is the platform, but it goes to my web server or our web server and initiates the deployment from whatever I want to initiate it from. And I'm hoping to see more and more vendors across the board implementing stuff like this, because this is fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can use my management solution, Intune Config Manager, to put that payload there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, cool. I think we'll wrap up for today. I really appreciate everybody's time and you all taking the time to talk. And for those of you who are watching, just come out to our website. We do different webinars and presentations from time to time, but twopointsoftware.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. Thank you.
Yay.
The only objection I have is that we all introduced ourselves, but not Tim.
I'm sorry,
Tim
I
didn't.
introduced myself briefly.
Okay, I'm Tim. Okay, I'm Tim.
Yeah,
Okay, well that works.
right.
That was pretty good. I'm happy with
Yeah.
the kind of the content that we talked about there, and certainly I got to do my pitch about what the value out of 2Pint is, which is part of it. So,
Yeah.
and Michelle will be happy.
Yeah.
But anything we missed?
I don't know. Maybe just overlay this
Yeah. Yeah.
image at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe I
Maybe
can do it in full
towards the
screen
end.
also.
Yeah.
See if that works. That was not better.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Yay.
Yay. It's pretty painless. So
All right. If there are any last minute words you want to get on the recording, else shall I stop it?
Nope.
No, I'm thrilled.
All right. Gonna end that one.